Hetapu, Namaste, Assalamu alaikum. This is Qesankh with another exciting video for you. In this video, we're going to talk about why the ancient Egyptians were not black. But before I do that, I want you to hit the like button on this video. If this is your first time to my channel, hit the subscribe button to get notifications on when I go live and when I upload recorded videos. Now, if you want to know more about my spiritual teachings, you can scroll down below and click on one of the ebook links, and you can download them today. They're free and start reading them. However, if you want to see how deep that rabbit hole goes, you can become a Patreon supporter for as little as $1, $5, or $20. It's up to you. You can cancel at any time. And you'll get exclusive access to instructional videos on the esoteric, on the spiritual, videos that'll teach you how to meditate, how to astral project, how to invoke spirits for your protection, how to do a money ritual, how to do self-hypnosis to curb your overeating. And if you are an Osira level supporter, you'll get your oracle readings for free. So become a Patreon supporter today. Last but not least, share this video with family and friends so we can get the revolution started. So, Haru Nefa, may Buddha bless you. Grand Rising. I hope that you are well today. It's been a very, very busy week for me trying to do a million things. You know, when you have that Ma'at as your clan, that means you're truly expansive. So you're trying to do so many things at once, and then you realize that you're spread too thin and you've got to pull back, you know. And then when you're an empath, you tend to absorb people's emotions, and that can give you what we call the two of pentacle cards from the tarot. You're going here, you're going there, and your emotions are out of control because you really can't, you know, when other people are going through strong emotions, you'll feel it, you know. I remember as a child, my mother and I walking by a building, and I had a vision that was so powerful, I almost passed out. She was holding my hand and caught me before I hit the floor. I didn't know anything about this building. But when we got back, she had told me that that building it was a very famous incident in the South Bronx, where the building was, I think it was a club or a bar or something, caught fire. And there were no escape exits, so a lot of people died. And since then, they enacted new laws in terms of the number of number of fire escapes or exits and things of that nature. But it was such a powerful feeling for me. It was overcoming, you know. It was like, whoa. And I remember the high priest, someone asking him, has he ever been to Egypt? He said, no, he probably, it'd be too much for him because he'd be going back to where he lived as a priest. And I can understand that because it's very difficult if you're an empath to deal with these emotions and deal with these situations. I used to go by certain places. I mean, this one thing that happened to me as a child didn't stop. It continued on and on and on. I would go by certain places and I would feel the energy there. And the energy would not be good. I just was about to pass out. And I knew something had occurred there. I went to the museum in New York. This is about 10 years ago with a friend, good friend Sean. And we went to the Egyptian exhibit. And I literally couldn't stand. The energy was so powerful going in there. And I'm so glad that Sean had said this upon exiting. He said, you know what? You could feel the energy. I said, oh, I'm glad you felt it too, because you know, I thought I was going crazy, but it was really like just bothering me. I couldn't stand, you know. And don't forget, like, all of us have these abilities, but this society is structured in such a way that it puts chemicals in your food and things in the water to suppress these abilities because they don't want a bunch of God men and God women walking around, if you understand what I mean. So it's very important that you understand that these things that I'm doing, you can do them too. There's nothing different, you know. This is how we get your scammers and your pimp pastors who come along and tell you that they are the anointed ones. They are the ones that are communicating with God. You know, the Pharaoh Akhenaten tried that crap, and the priesthood got rid of him really quick. We are all a conduit. We all have access to Neter or Nebuchadnezzar. No one is so special that they have the ear of God. God is within us all. So, and I'm going to talk about this toward the end of this broadcast. So stay tuned, stay to the end. It's very important. Because we must understand who we truly are. See, we haven't gotten down to the nuts and bolts of what's going on this planet. You have no idea of what's taking place. You have no concept of what's taking place. And I'm not allowed to tell you. But you get hints of it when you tune into other broadcasts. Hints of special ops projects, black projects, you know, things like that. Or a divergent society or civilization. And you're not meant to know about these things that go on. So we go through our lives and we ignore that side of the world instead of embracing it, because upon first inspection, it can be very terrifying to understand what's going on. But once you embrace this, along with it comes the idea that you're God man and God woman, and you have powers, unbelievable powers. This is why they don't want you to know this stuff. Don't you understand? This is why they created Western religions. Do you think there really was a Jesus who was walking this planet, the Son of God? Do you really think that there was this Muhammad? These religions were created, now they're left brain religions, to keep you polarized in left brain thinking. Well, what's the purpose of that, Qesankh? To keep you from exploring your powers as God man and God woman. Because once you start getting into the right brain, the subconscious mind, the awakening, you will come to the realization that you are not human, that you have existed for trillions of years before time. And we need to start exploring this. We are such a backwards and primitive society that is disgusting. This is why there are secret civilizations on this planet with high technology and high knowledge that look down upon us, that don't have empathy for us, who have a plan to eradicate most people of color off the planet. And one day I'll do a video getting into how they were able to take over the planet, the powers that they use to do that so you can use it, and the future, where we're going. Because we definitely need to start exploring these things. To see, the problem is, and I'm going to say this in a very loving way, but ADOS people, FBA people are the culture is corrupt. You're backwards. You're ignorant. You don't know anything. And you celebrate ignorance through the rap music, the lyrics, Meanwhile, there's some heavy stuff going on that you need to be privy to. Instead, you go around calling yourself king, queen, this, that. But everything you do betrays that. It keeps you limited. I want to explore to you, or with you, how detrimental this society is upon your psyche for both Black people and white people. The idea of I'm woke. You're not woke. You're full of shit. You're not woke. You think you woke, but you're not. Because this society has you in a matrix where you're fighting for your own imprisonment. You're fighting so that one day they can kill you. You are actively assisting them in your elimination. I'm not being hyperbolic. Trust me. I'm deadly, deadly serious. You are assisting them in your own extermination because you don't know yourself. You don't understand what's going on in the world. And more importantly, you have succumbed to the programming. You have followed the Jim Jones and drank the Kool-Aid and claim that you're free. And I'm like, no, you're going to die in about 2 minutes. You drank that stuff is going to kill you. I'm free. No, I'm telling you, in 2 minutes, you're going to die. But you still profess you're free. Because you've been so brainwashed by the society. You think up is down and down is up. Literally, you do. You're dysfunctional. And I'm not just talking about the Hotep community. I'm talking about the average Joe. You're dysfunctional. Black people and you white people are in the same boat. You're dysfunctional too. You're so dysfunctional. And you don't even really, you think you're sane, but you're insane. You are insane people. Thinking you are civilized. You're not. You are uncivilized. When you study the great works of the Greek historians who visited Africa and the many kingdoms in Africa, not just ancient Kemet, but the one thing they talked about was how people walked around freely. The women could walk around naked. The children could just play in the street without their mothers or fathers. You could leave your doors unlocked. You would not be robbed. There were no serial killers. There were no pedophiles. That is civilization. And there were no police. Here, if the police, let's say hypothetically, like in RoboCop, the police went on strike, there would be mass murder. There would be raping and pillaging because you are uncivilized, and external means to put you in order do not change your nature. See, some remnants of this still exist in Chinese and Japanese culture. And the key word is they have a culture. No littering when you go to Japan. No just going up to somebody and touching them. Cultural norms and morals. Here, I had some woman come up here and start touching my hair. Oh, your hair looks nice. I'm like, I tell you not, you can touch my hair. And that's racist too, lady. You know? But I want to explore to you, or with you, the detrimental effects of the society upon your psyche, which to you, you don't even realize this, and we may even call it cognitive dissonance. If you don't know what that means, look it up. I would say this is a more extreme version of cognitive dissonance, but it exists under the guise of white supremacy, meaning that even though you see something in front of you, you can't believe it or accept it. You can't process it. And I used to tell this as a half joke when I met this woman who was so beautiful that I was at a loss for words. And I have known no other as beautiful as her except for me. So we were a match. So I told her how beautiful she was and how I had to have her. And then she told me she had a boyfriend. And I looked at her with a perplexed expression on my face. And I said to her, I have heard that word many times, but I don't know what it means. I cannot accept it in my reality. Because in my reality, she was mine. And that is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a culture and a civilization that has conditioned the masses of white people on this planet to think, making them think they are superior. And the masses of people on this planet to make them think that they are inferior. And I don't give a damn if you say, no, it's not me. It is you. It is you. Because you are under the guise and control of what we call a pendulum or an ergobore. And I don't care how many times you say, no, I don't feel inferior. You act inferior. It is a subconscious process. You'll never recognize a subconscious process. Because it's not something for you to be aware of. And along with that, many of our brothers and sisters have succumbed to this white supremacist doctrine. For example, when I grew up in the South Bronx, many of this is years ago, Puerto Ricans thought I was Puerto Rican. So I was privy to things about them. I would date the Puerto Rican girls and go. I remember there's one girl I was dating, and I went to her home. I didn't want to go there, but she wanted me to meet her parents. And I was just like, oh, God, I don't know what's going on with this. So I went to meet her parents. They were nice and made dinner for me. And her mother could not accept the fact that I did not speak Spanish. And she kept saying, I know you can speak Spanish. So she would talk to me in Spanish, and I would say, listen, I don't understand the word you're saying. So I was leaving the door, I thanked her for the dinner, and her last words were, I know you can speak Spanish. You may have my daughter fooled, but you don't have me fooled. And I said, for real, I don't speak Spanish. Of course, I was lying. But as I left, what was the purpose of that story? Oh, so many of the light-skinned Puerto Ricans had issues with dark-skinned Puerto Ricans. One of my best friends was dark-skinned Puerto Rican. And he would hear how the lighter-skinned Puerto Ricans would talk negatively. They thought he was black. So it was really funny me and him hanging together. So there are these racial strifes within ethnicities or races, which there really are no races, but anyway, to where lighter-skinned Cuban don't like darker-skinned Cuban, the Afro-Cuban. or the Afro-Colombians who are dark don't get as many privileges as the Afro Colombians don't get as many privileges as the lighter skinned Colombians. Same thing with the Brazilians, even though the population of Brazil is mostly black, large percentage of blacks. And it's funny because when you trace back their heritage, those from Puerto Rico, we know that a lot of them come from when you call them Latino, the Taino Indians or the natives. But yet, they're still caught up on the color thing. And the lighter skinned ones, when I was growing up, and I know it's still the same today, tried to pass as white. And there were some that could. And this has been a problem in Hollywood too, as well. But I digress. I bring this up to let you know that many of our Cuban, Colombian, Puerto Rican, Dominicans who can pass for white align themselves with the white supremacist ideology. And in their mindset, cannot believe that Black people were the fathers and mothers of civilization. They cannot accept it, even though they're minorities themselves. But because they can pass for white, they have adopted white supremacist ideology. They have succumbed to that. And I can get into a lot of the Black feminists, the radical Black feminists. A lot of them also have succumbed to white supremacist ideology, but that's another video. But not for now, we're talking about our Latino brothers and sisters who align with the notion that Black people are primitive. I was on the phone in my office in New York several years ago, and I heard the Puerto Rican woman next to me on the phone talking to a friend about how her daughter brought home a Black guy, and it bothered her. And I had to stop talking on the phone for a second and what? What did I just hear? What did I just hear? And the notion came to me to walk down the human resources and report her, which I should have did. Because even though their history of oppression and enslavement aligns with our ADOS, FBA, Friedman. If you don't understand what I mean by those terms, please Google it. They believe that because they were brought to a different island, that they're not part of an oppressive history. Or in their minds, an inferior race. When asked once, what does he consider himself? Castro said prophetically, I am Afro-Cuban. And I am so glad he said that. He may have meant it or not, but it was good for him to utter that. Because many people in these cultures who were darker skinned, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Colombian, Brazilian, are oppressed by their own fellow brothers and sisters. I told you the story of the Brazilian woman who won the Miss Brazil beauty contest, dark-skinned sister. But then after she won, the judges got all of these letters and protests from people of Brazil complaining about her dark skin and how could she be Miss Brazil. And do you know what the judges did? They took her title away and gave it to a lighter skinned Brazilian woman. How disgusting. They bent to pressure. How disgusting. Now, I'm bringing all this because I want to present to you something that occurred on social media. And I'm always on social media trying to educate people about history, world history, not just Black history, but world history, and the importance of understanding it. Because I'm a big fan of the Greek and Roman cultures. So I study up on them. So what I'm about to do is I'm about to show you a conversation I had, who I believe was a Latino brother who had adopted a white supremacist ideology. And typically, before I show you the conversation on social media, typically with the white supremacists, especially the liberals, when it comes to you telling them that Black civilization was a high culture civilization, what they always try to do is try to dictate to you what civilization you should be studying and being proud of. Because when you lay claim to an advanced civilization, they don't believe it because their identity is that you are inferior. So they try to dictate to you what civilization you should be proud of, and you should be studying that civilization. How disrespectful is that? So let's look at this conversation thread that I had on Facebook, and I'm going to put him on blast because he needs to be. I actually blocked him too. But this is going to be an example of the psychology of the white supremacist ideology and how, to the degree it has affected even our Latino brothers and sisters. So here is a Facebook post. Now, I posted this up. It was created by Mr. Hotep, and you should go to his channel. It's a really good channel. And I said, basically, don't think Hollywood got the memo yet. And here's what this says. Let me see if I can put this bigger for you guys. Well, that's big. I think that's big. Well, yeah, I think that's big, right? Okay. So, let me get this right. Here's what it says. The men of Egypt are mostly brown or Black with a skinny, desiccated look. And I'm thinking he's talking about like desiccated, meaning stoic or uninterested look. And this is by the Roman historian Anamenus Marcellinus, circa 354 to 378 AD. So we're talking about eyewitness accounts of what the Egyptians looked like. Now, I posted this and, a friend responded, but here's a gentleman named Hector, and here's how he responded. I want to make sure you can see this. Let me bring this up bigger so you can actually see and read this. Okay, great. All right, so he says to me, Egypt was an ethnically, he means diverse empire that held people as diverse as Greeks, Arabic, and Nubian people. Some were white, some were Black, often they were mixed. If you want to read about a truly Black African empire that was a contemporary of the Egyptians and the Romans, then read about the Nubians. They built cities and pyramids too. There's a lot to unpack with that, and I'm not going to get too much into the details, but he outs himself, and he doesn't even realize it, by saying that the Nubians built pyramids too. Now, his conjecture is that Egypt is a multicultural civilization. There is no civilization on this planet that ancient civilization that was the product of many other civilizations and people, an amalgamation. It doesn't work that way. You understand? The indigenous people build and create, and then from what they have created, they either do the trade with foreign nations, or they are attacked and taken over by other civilizations, causing a mixture. So his hypothesis that the Egyptian empire in nature was created by diverse people is stupid. That doesn't make any damn sense. But that's his way of trying to say, you should be studying about the Nubians. You shouldn't be trying to claim the Egyptians, because we know that every historian agrees that the civilization reached its zenith in ancient Egypt. It's the pinnacle. So he doesn't want us to claim that. He'd rather us claim Nubia. But he outed himself when he said Nubia built pyramids and cities too. The numbskull doesn't even understand that Nubians, that Egypt is heavily influenced by Nubia, and it was a product of the Nubians. Now, Hector goes on to say that Egypt was a Black civilization. It was not diverse. I'm sorry, I said this to this guy. So I said Egypt was a Black civilization. It was not diverse. Diversity came from foreign invaders like the Hyksos later on, then the Greek and Roman occupation. Egypt is a product of Nubia, so the civilization of Egypt and those who built the pyramids were Black Africans. So if there are pyramids in Nubia, deductive reasoning concludes that because you have pyramids in Nubia, not as grand on the scale in Egypt, that the pyramid building started in Nubia and then went to Egypt, where it was perfected. But this clown, Hector, the Egyptian empire lasted for thousands of years. It was influenced and populated by many people because it was at the crossroads between Africa, Asia, and Europe. Its population reflected that dynamic. Its borders changed, encompassing different people at various times. Nubians were one component at various times that reflected those changes, but they were not the sole contributor of Egyptian culture, but in the Nubian empires they were. Now he's contradicting himself. For one thing, Egypt, and every historian will agree with me, that Egypt was not the product of Africa, Asian, and European influence. It was not. There's no way a civilization that is native to Africa can owe its start to a diversity of other civilization halfway around the world. That's ridiculous. This man has no brain. And yet he readily admits that Nubia had cities, civilization, pyramids, but still doesn't want to say that the only way that Egypt came into being was because of the Nubians. Because he knows the Nubians were Black, and he doesn't want to contribute that to the fact that Egypt was a black civilization. And Hector says, my belief is that the Nubians don't get mentioned because they defeated the Egyptians, they defeated the Romans, and had just as advanced civilization as in many in the Mediterranean world, but they were exclusively black Africans besting Europeans, so their history gets neglected, but they were here and created a powerful, great empire that deserves to be acknowledged because they are part of our history. So what he wants to do is deflect and say, you should be celebrating the Nubians because they beat the Romans and they beat all these other people, and they had a high civilization, but not as advanced as the Egyptians, because the Egyptians was a product of Asian, European, and Spaniard, and whatever else and aliens he can make up, that's ridiculous. No historian will agree to that fact. And the reason that we see that later on, and we're going into the downfall of Egypt, when you see it being diverse and a type of a cosmopolitan, is because Egypt was along the coastal region where you can do trades with different nations, and that facilitated mergers and mingling. And so over time, and well, I'll get into that next, but let's just go on. So I go to Hector, stop being influenced by modern media. If you say there were pyramids in Nubia, then they are the ones who began pyramid building and migrated to Egypt. There are numerous eyewitness accounts, one by, now here I'm stating facts, Herodotus, Greek historian, who went to Egypt and said that the Egyptians were black. The hieroglyphics from the early dynasties that you don't see on the TV represent the Egyptians as they saw themselves, black. And you should know that modern media tries to keep you from seeing the hieroglyphics of the Egyptians as black because they don't want to portray that in mainstream media. Now, even the racist Egyptian archaeologist and former caretaker of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, that scum, Sahis Hawass, after doing melanin tests on the mummies, had to publicly admit the Egyptians were black. Now, let me give you a background on Zahi Hawass. He was the caretaker of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, but he also was fired for theft. And he originally said the Egyptians were not black, then came out and said that they were black, but they weren't the same type of black as the black people in the United States or in Africa. Duh. I mean, the leaps and bounds they go through to lie. So Zahi Hawass has always been lying. If you read, you would see the evidence is overwhelming. Start with Qesankh Diop, who did language and melanin tests, concluded in the 1974 UNESCO conference that the ancient Egyptians were black, whose origins can be traced to Nubia. And I have the actual interview with him. And he talks about this in his book, about when he went to the UNESCO conference and he brought this mountain of evidence to prove that Egyptians were black. None of the other white Egyptologists or historians could refute him. In fact, they said, we haven't come prepared. I'm sorry, we're not prepared to refute your claims, but we will take that and then into consideration. And they just, and in academia, when they know you're right, the way that they suppress your information is to ignore you. So here's the video. And then here are the Egyptian hieroglyphs of the Egyptian women. And then I have some more of the Egyptian women in the temple of Hathor or Hathor. So he says, YouTube is not a source of real knowledge. YouTube is where non-knowledge is given a platform. Look, let me explain something. You can take college courses on YouTube. You can find interviews with Nobel Prize winning scientists on YouTube. You can find interviews with them. You can find courses that they taught. He's just saying this because he can't process the idea of a great civilization like Egypt to be a product of black people. So here's the again the hieroglyphic. And this is what he goes. So I'm dismissing it as nonsense. Give me something better, my friend. And yes, I'm calling you my friend because that's the only option we have. He's not my friend. So I go, YouTube does interviews with scholars. So you are saying an interview with a noted scientist telling the results of his research is not authentic? I'm sure you would be okay if it was a white man giving his perspective that supports yours. That's what I was trying to say. You, sir, are a white supremacist. Get off my feed before I block you. And then this is what he says about the hieroglyphics, but he calls them pictures. See, he doesn't even know how the correct term for them. Oh, pictures that tell us nothing on Egyptians, that Egyptians, except they had a diverse population, but nothing more. So he's saying, oh, all those pictures prove they had a diverse population. Well, where is the white people? Where is the white people? And then if you can show me, and I don't even want to get into where white people were in terms of their advancement in the first dynasty of Egypt or during the Nubian Empire, pre-dynastic Egypt. And he's saying, oh, well, these pictures don't mean anything. It just tells how diverse it was. A total nincompoop. So my last words were, I blocked the white supremacist. And I left it at that. All right. So what do you mean, what were Egyptians? They were black. What do you mean, what were Egyptians? I don't understand. So it's clear that even, as I said before, our Latino brothers and sisters suffer from this cognitive dissonance, this alignment with white supremacist ideology, so much so that they can deny the information in front of their eyes. I have given him at least 3 sources from noted scholars, one contemporary, Zahi Sawas, 2, one a Greek historian, another a Roman historian who lived during that time and wrote about the Egyptians. And then I'm giving you what the hieroglyphics look like of the ancient Egyptians. And I have cited a noted scientist, Dr. Qesankh Diop, who did melanin tests on the mummies and traced the Egyptian language back to Africa, not Europe, the Egyptian culture back to African culture, most close to, not Europe. And yet, this person of Hispanic origin cannot accept it, cannot process that. When I was studying with Dr. Joseph Ben Janakanan, he told me a story of when he was doing a tour in Egypt. How he walked into one temple and there was a large statue guarding the entranceway of an Egyptian guard. And the guard was painted black. So he said an old white woman came up to him and said, why is that guard painted black? And Dr. Ben said, because the Egyptians were black. And she said, no, they weren't. And he goes, yes, they were. And then she said, I refuse to believe it. And he said, live in ignorance. We are so conditioned by this matrix that we have lost a sense of reality. Both white people and black people. And I'm going to say this, that the reason that these white people, it's not all white people, there's a lot of good white people who know the truth and do speak up about it. But the reason that these white people believe the Egyptians to be white and go on propagating this lie is your fault, black people. It's your fault. Because if from day one, when you found out that Egypt was really a product of black civilization, you should have taken everything about Egypt and gone Egypt crazy. Started naming your sons and daughters after Egyptian pharaohs and gods. Started practicing the Egyptian religion. If you had did that, no other people in the world could have done what you're calling cultural appropriation, or could have said that the Egyptians were white. If you had done that from the very beginning, instead of going to these churches, these mega churches, with your T.D. Jakes, your Creflo Dollar, Frederick Casey Price, and making them into multimillionaires, if you had set up Egyptian temples, and instead of going to these mosques to be Islam and be, the true religion of God, if you had did that from the very beginning, there would be no university. No one in the world that could say that the Egyptian civilization wasn't a product of black people. But you dropped the ball when you started tithing thousands of dollars to these Christian ministers, when you allowed these other cultures to come in and take the artifacts, put them in the museums, lay claim to it. And to this very day, even though you know the truth, you still run around as a Hebrew Israelite, as a Muslim, as a Christian, as a Jew. If you had claimed what was yours, you would not have this problem of Hollywood making movies in the hot region of the Sahara Desert where only black people could survive, with your lily white Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra, or Gods of Egypt, or whatever nonsense, the Ten Commandments. Hollywood could not have done that if you had laid claim from the very beginning. If you want to know more about this, I recommend you get this book, Black Pharaoh by Nensa Amen. You should pick this book up. You can order it online. Very good book. Another one is Not Out of Greece, a very technical book, very good. I love it. This is a good one for you. And the last one is Black Spark, White Fire. And this is about a man who took it upon himself to do research and to take one of the skulls of the Egyptians and to forensically rebuild it to that. And this shows the result of a black man, a priest. Now, what he means by black spark, white fire is kind of like a metaphor, meaning it was started by black people, but then along the way, white people came in, invaders and things of that nature, and it became white. But in this book, It is phenomenal what he did, because he really goes into detail about how Egyptians were black. These civilizations are black civilization. Did African explorers civilize ancient Europe? Okay, so get that book. I could go into a lot of other stuff, a lot of other stuff that would just put a nail in the coffin, and this whole idea that the Egyptians were white. We could talk about the prognosticism, especially when it comes to the Sphinx, that proved beyond a shadow of doubt that the Egyptian culture was that of people of color, black people. I can go into the BBC documentary, the series, Cleopatra, Portrait of a Serial Killer, where they do examinations of Cleopatra's family and find that they all had prognosticism, and then they go on to say that was common among the time of those people of color. So telling you that these Egyptians were black. I could go into how the civilization was determined and built by its geographical location, meaning that the pyramids were built by whole brain thinkers. Western civilization is a product of left brain thinkers, and your region has a lot of contribution and determines how you think, whether you're polarizing left brain thinking or whole brain thinking. And that you can see from the idea that if you're a whole brain thinker, when we look at whole brain civilizations, we can see very, very distinct ways in which they approach science, which they approach engineering, mathematics, and so forth, versus those of left brain, how they approached it. And then you can clearly see that the pyramid cultures were a product of whole brain civilizations, black people. So I could get into all of that, but they would just like ignore that information. That's what they do. See, when you have accepted that white supremacist ideology, it serves the ego. And anything that conflicts with the ego is filtered out. This is why, in face of the evidence, they cannot accept it. They cannot accept it. If you like these videos, please donate to the channel. Also, remember to hit the like button. But I'm trying to just tell you that this culture of Cardi B, Kanye West, those things are distractions to keep you from knowing yourself and who you are, to keep you from claiming the truth about your legacy. We are an incredible people, and we did incredible things. But we'll never be able to accomplish those things ever again if we don't claim what's ours. Egypt is not about Egyptology and studying it. It's a way of life. It is your religion. These are your gods. Pray to them. Follow the spiritual tenets. And don't let anybody transgress against those. This is Qesankh Keperu, son of Ma and Tahuti. My aunt is the beautiful goddess Heteru. Until my next video, I'm in the Ra.